Hello and welcome to the OSCIA Planter and Drill and Air Seeder series, where we're going around the countryside speaking to people about the drills and planters that they're using. Today we're up at Lucknow, Ontario at the farm of Lawrence Hogan and Steve Howard, who are also the people that introduced me to the biostrip concept. And we may talk about that a little bit, but we're going to talk about why they pick the drills that they do, what decisions do they use to make those purchases, and how are the machines that they're using working for them. Lawrence and Steve, thank you very much for joining us today, or for us coming to visit with you guys. And can you just sort of describe a little bit about the history of the farm and who's currently involved?
Currently, it's Steve and myself, basically, and so with the support of our wives and some other family members, but it's mainly Steve and myself. And we own land separately. We share a lot of our equipment, and so going back for the history, so we first started into no-till back in the early '80s with winter wheat. And through the '80s, we were using a ridge till system for corn and soybeans and white beans as well. Transitioned to mainly no-till for, I'd say, through the '90s, no-till everything in a 4-year rotation. So there was 2 years of beans, whether it be two soys or soys and whites, and no-tilling corn after the soybean crop. Worked well, except for we didn't like the idea of 2 years of beans, and then as years went on, I guess going back about 8 years, we went back. We discovered the row cleaner machine, and we used it ahead of the corn crop for 2 years. The 1 year was frost-seeded red clover after winter wheat, and then the next year was a summer-seeded multi-species cover crop after winter wheat. And we used that row cleaner. It worked quite well. And then we discovered the biostrip system, which we have been using now for, I guess this past spring was the 6th year we've planted into biostrips.
Steve, maybe talk about the crops and the soils and slopes that you guys are dealing with here in upper Huron County.
We have a wide-ranging soil types from berry sand to heavy clays, and nothing's real rolling. I guess our most rolling land is in some permanent grass, permanent hay, and pastures.
And in terms of the soils, are there specific fields that are different soils, or you can find those soil types throughout different fields, or the same field? Sorry.
Yes, our fields range in each field. Is none of them are consistent.
In terms of the crops and the cover crops that you guys have here on the farm, including corn, beans, cereals, and an array of different cover crops, what is the seeding equipment that you have available to you?
So for the corn, we use it's an 8-row John Deere corn planter with a few modifications. It's got the Delta Force on it, has row cleaners on it with air adjust, which are not essential anymore, being that we do go ahead of planting with our row cleaner implement a couple days ahead of planting, and then we no-till into that. The beans, we're using the seed drill for twin row planting, and also we have the corn planter set up with we piggybacked an integral planter on behind it, so we are also planting twin rows with it. 10-inch twins in that case, 7.5-inch twins with the drill.
Soybeans only.
Soybeans only. Mainly now just the biostrips after winter wheat. We have played with interplanting into corn and cereal rye after corn, but we haven't been real happy with that at this point.
What is the decision process that you guys would use when you come to the conclusion that it's time to replace seeding equipment?
Well, I guess we haven't really replaced anything for this drill. I guess is about 25 years old now.
Early 2000s, I think it was.
Yeah. And I guess when we last corn planter, we changed. We changed because we wanted it to go to 8 row from 12 back down to 8, and also to dry fertilizer.
If you were to change your planting equipment, would you anticipate other parts of the operation that would have to change?
Or would we change to stay with the same system? Maybe.
Okay, just
Mhm.
upgrade
Yeah. I think it would be more just to upgrade.
based on your acres and the way your rotation and stuff works.
Yeah. I think it could, if you were going bigger, obviously that could affect tractor size and tender equipment. But generally, the other thing on you have in the list there, tractor, oil capacity needed. It could be a reason to change tractors.
So when you guys think of your planter and your drill, there's must-have things that you need on a planter, and there's nice-to-have things. What do you consider the must-have things?
You must have adequate ballast, particularly in no-till, and you must have enough downforce, whether it be mechanical or hydraulic. A big advantage in to make the no-till system work is to have that soil's got to be dry.
And so that's where your row cleaner comes into play before the planter, as opposed to relying on the row cleaners on the planter itself.
Correct. Yes.
What about for the drill, Steve? What are the must-haves on the drill?
I guess maybe this doesn't pertain so much to the drill, but in our system, GPS is a huge advantage. Both corn planter and drill, and row cleaner. Um,
And you added active downforce to this planter late or the drill lately, so that
I think it's going to increase the lifetime of a lot of the wear parts on it.
Prior to the active downforce, we did have adjustable from the cab, which I would call a must-have. You get to those hard headlands, you can, or clay knolls or whatever, you can at least increase the pressure from the cab, not have that extreme pressure the whole field that way.
and so then nice to haves on either of the units.
Well, the delta force for sure is, I guess you call it nice to have. It's how do you
Become pretty essential.
yeah, it's become, yeah, I wouldn't start without it now myself. Um, Especially with our varying soil types, you just know that you're not compacting the the areas of the field that maybe aren't as dry as you'd like them. The closing system is, yeah, the is yeah, not the one we're using on the planter now. It's the Martin, what do they call it, two-stage closing. Um, it's probably not a must-have, but definitely a nice to have.
When you bought the units that you bought, recognizing that you've got some years on them because of the amount of ground that you farm and the maintenance that you put into them, what were the game changers that made you decide on the units that you bought?
I don't know, John Deere planter to John Deere planter.
Yeah.
Um,
We did go from liquid to dry fertilizer.
on that one, that's true. Yeah, and that was economical reasons. Basically, the liquid fertilizers at that time anyway is roughly double the cost.
Talk about your corn planter.
That picture shows the planter in the field of biostrips. One thing about the biostrips, they do look different every year depending on how the different species overwinter. In that particular one, we're mostly seeing cereal rye, somewhat of a spotty catch there. This past season, that would be 2 years, or last year, 2022. In 2023, it was a totally different view with hairy vetch overwintered very well. And when I was going,
Almost too well.
yeah, I was going through the planter, you could just see a narrow strip between the wheel track strips. So changes every year. And they're showing the saddle tanks we do use for a mix of 28% and ammonium thiosulfate. That's pretty much covers that one. That's just a little closer shot of it.
So dry fertilizer in individual seed boxes,
Correct.
and you're delivering a good, other than the remainder of nitrogen, everything is going on the planter for the most part.
We do spread as well.
Okay.
Quite a bit of phosphorus and potash in the rotation. At this point, it's 100 pounds of MAP and 30 pounds of 0060 as a dry. And that goes with the seed, or sorry, 2x2. And yeah, nothing with the seed. So there it shows the, you can see it doesn't show it really well, but we are putting I guess it's 12 gallons of that 28 ATS mix with the dry fertilizer in a 2x2, and then 6 more gallons out the back. You see the blue hose going out the back, and that gets dribbled on the opposite side of the row on top. We're up to the highest rate safe in the 2x2. So that shows it a little better. Maybe you can see the steel tube going down the back side of the fertilizer, the dry fertilizer boot, and it goes right down into the trench. Shows the row cleaner there that we have with the air adjust, which I would say isn't essential, being that we're going through ahead of time with the row cleaner implement. It does clean up anything that got missed by it. So, yeah, that just sort of shows the job after the planter's gone through.
And I think this was the 21 spring.
I think you're right, yes. And there it shows the planter that we've hooked on behind for soybeans, so that gives us the 10-inch twins. It works well, but it is cumbersome to fill. The center fill would be the better way to go for sure. And that just shows the row cleaner we added on the for the back planter. And there again, I don't think it would be worth the while or the expense to put them on, because we do row clean the corn stalks as well ahead of planting.
Now we're going to do a walk around of the planter and, of the grain drill, and we'll talk about that.
I guess the most obvious thing on our drill that we've modified is the addition of the Velmar sulfur air delivery system. And right at this moment, we have it set up for our biostrips. These rollers just to deliver to the wheel tracks system, rows. So it's only half of the rows are being fed. These rollers are the ones that we use when we're planting wheat for dry fertilizer.
And then when you're planting soybeans, are you fertilizing?
No. So when we're planting soybeans, we're not using this system at all, just the original box, and it's planting in twin rows configuration.
And then when you're planting wheat, fertilizer is in the south.
Yes, then all rows are being planted then.
It could be used if you wanted to add fertilizer in the row with soybeans, but
We're
not advocates of that. So we switched to VF tires, about what, I guess 2 years ago. And so they're the well, they're 480s. They've went from 15-inch to 17-inch, much more flotation, and we can go down to 12 psi with them. Just trying to alleviate compaction just as much as we can, even though we are in a no-till system. But particularly planting wheat, you don't always have that chance to wait for 100% conditions, and that certainly saves in compaction there. We're happy with those tires.
And in the bio strips, you want to just point out, Lawrence, the not all the varieties, but the sort of the mix.
Yeah, sure. So this one is our wheel track mix. So that's species that may overwinter, tend to be higher in lignin and higher in carbon as far as sequestering carbon goes. This one is our corn row strip mix, and it tends to be, it is ones that will not overwinter. The idea there is to have that row area dead in the spring. And you can see, you can actually see in this photo some settling, that this jug has been knocking around the shop here most of the summer. And you can see the small seeds have actually settled down to the bottom, and the larger ones have, you might say, floated up. And so we see that also in the drill box happening as you're bouncing across the field, and we do stop, probably every 20, 30 acres and stir that up with a small auger on a cordless seed drill or cordless drill. Yeah.
At the back here, we've changed the covering wheels to the notched ones long time ago. And here we have, it's the John Deere narrower in-furrow wheel, press wheel. And this is something new that we've just tried. You can't really tell by just looking at it, but it's a hard plastic gauge wheel. We just have a few rows with those on. We think they will last a lot longer, and they seem to be performing just fine.
So this is the air brake. It's a Needham air brake, and when planting wheat, the fertilizer's coming down this tube from the Valmar, and then the wheat seed down this tube, and then it joins at this point, releases the air pressure, and down into the seed trench. When we're planting the cover crop, it's basically in twins. So the corn row strip will be coming down this tube in pairs of rows, and then the other pairs will be the wheel track coming down this one from the Valmar. And then also then planting soybeans, we're in twin rows, and at that point everything's coming from the seed box down that tube, and there again it's pairs. So every other pair will have nothing, and the opposite pairs will have the beans in them. And then the also this shows for the cedar forest system, we got the module. We place them on just half the rows. It's the rows that we plant soybeans with, and that picks up the downforce and adjusts the 4 ranks on the drill separately.
So prior to having the cedar forest system, we would adjust our down pressure on the go with this. It's power window motor, and I guess you needed to know a little bit of your history of your field, where the harder areas would be, and we could adjust the pressure up, watch the gauge on the go. It was really inexpensive, but we agree it's a must-have. When we're planting soys, the twin rows, we have these chains set up so that they will fall right where the old corn row is, so that we can adjust just an inch or two one way or the other to keep our twin rows right dead center between the corn rows. Just keeping out of the corn stalks as much as we can when we're planting.
Probably found that even a bigger advantage when we used to plant 15-inch rows in between the corn rows, where it's even more important to be dead on to try to stay away from that corn row. So you just glance back, and if that chain's tickling the corn row, you're good. If it's not, you adjust.
And that's where the GPS really comes into play there. You can just move it 1 inch one way or the other. Yeah.
Back when it was a manual adjust, this gauge here would tell you what pressure you're at. And we found that in the no-till, especially the harder ground, we're often up into the red. So then once we switched over though, this gauge becomes inactive. And so we added this gauge on here, and that tells you what the pressure is in this rank. And what we found was that the cedar force in general uses much less downforce than what we did when we were manual. You're probably over pressure a lot of the time because it's hard to tell from the tractor seat, do you have enough downforce or not to get the seat in the ground? And we're quite surprised to know how low that was running compared to what we used to. I think that covers.
I guess before the GPS, the markers were a must back then, but they don't get used near as much now.
No.
How do headlands mess with your system in terms of using your planter and your guidance and such?
Depends on the headland, how straight it is.
Yeah.
Some of our headlands, we have a straight track memorized right into the system. There's other ones that are curvy. We do still use markers the odd time.
On the planter, we switched to realize that on the John Deere single disc openers, you can actually get a heavier spring. Just found it in the operator's manual, and because they're known to not penetrate well enough in no-till situation. That did improve things. I think it's about a third heavier spring than what the original was.
Terrific.
I guess in part of the cedar forest system, there's each row has it's tells you if they're planting, so that's kind of a bonus to the cedar forest system.
Yeah.
Fed to a monitor in the cab?
Yes, yes.
And so you seldom have plugs that go
Well,
undetected.
Not for too long, anyways. It has to stop flowing. If you run out, it will tell you, or if it becomes plugged, it will tell you.
Mm-hmm. The scales that we mentioned earlier in the presentation, and that's been on there for about 20 years. It's you just pretty much have to have that, I think, anymore. And here we show that these are these are Needham press wheels, in-furrow wheels. They're more flexible than the John Deere. We switched just the front gang a few years ago. And if we wear out the back gang, we will be switching them to Needham, I think.
Recognizing that you guys haven't bought a planter in a long time, are there times in the past where you did buy a planter and it turned out to not be the right thing? Were there things that you would have done different after the fact?
Center fill would be the one thing. If we're in this for the long term, would be definitely thinking of center fill in the planter.
Just because of the awkwardness of filling the second set of units.
Correct.
Yeah.
All the individual ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As others are looking to change their systems and maybe adopt different ways of creating a cropping system, what pitfalls can you maybe help people avoid with your experience? So in the biostrip especially, right, a bit more interest in that now.
Yeah.
What does the planter have to look like to make that system work for you?
I got to say, there really isn't any in the biostrips as compared to straight no-till on the planter.
The row cleaner.
The row cleaner itself, that implement, that's what the difference is. And actually, and we did use that for 2 years, just straight no-tilling, no biostrips. And there again, I would say I'd highly recommend it for anyone that wants to no-till into
Anything.
wheat stubble for sure, and it'd be an advantage in some other stubbles as well. And as far as pitfalls, but Well, experience, not necessarily purchasing equipment, but just doing the job. Be patient and try to let that soil dry, and do what you can to expedite it, which would be, in our case, row cleaning. And think about your mix.
Starting right back at the combine, make sure you're
Absolutely, yeah.
spreading the trash.
Yeah, evenly, yeah.
And just to point out that the row cleaner is not a tillage implement. It's essentially just 2 sets of row cleaners that are pushing aside that residue
Yeah.
in the area where you're going to have the row units go.
Correct. Yeah, clears approximately a 14-inch band.
And it isn't 100% clear all the time. It depends on wind and other things, but it's always enough to let you get decent planting of the seeds.
Yep.
We have had years when we've had an exceptionally large crop of cover crop that we have had to row clean twice.
Those years when it goes down bad, from whether it be a wet snow on the green cover crop, in two instances. And then this past year, the hairy vetch kept growing and growing and spreading into the corn row area. We did go through twice as well to try to push that back.
But in our conversations before, it's not that costly to do.
No,
it's timely wise, it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a lot of power and fuel.
Yep.
Okay, very good. So on behalf of those that'll have a chance to see this seminar, I just want to thank Steve and Lawrence for being part of the series this year. And guys, thanks for having us here on the farm.
Thank you, Ian.